This is your ultimate stop for everything sports. The Golden State Media Concepts Sports Podcast. Should I say more? From the NFL, MLB, the NBA to MMA, it's all in here. The Golden State Media Concepts Sports Podcast. Listen now.
Alright, and welcome to the GSMC Sports Podcast. This episode is brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network, and as always, I am your host, Jesse Tapia. Alright, so it's the beginning of week 2 in the preseason. We got some flashes of what we saw last week amongst quarterbacks, the rookies, and all those other drafted players, but now probably going to be seeing a little bit more of what their true role is going to be on their teams going forward. So one thing I want to talk about for the first segment is the Jets quarterback situation. Who are they going to be starting there? Second segment, I want to talk some NBA. Third segment, we'll get over to the MLB. And then the fourth segment, we will be talking about anything else going on in the world of sports. So, we all know it. The Jets haven't really been a team who has ever been set at quarterback. Of course, Joe Namath got him a Super Bowl way back when, but ever since then, has there ever been anyone who's actually been the guy? I'd say maybe Chad Pennington, maybe. But even then, was Chad Pennington ever really truly great for the Jets? I wouldn't necessarily say so. They got rid of him for old man Brett Favre. Of course, that didn't really work out for the Jets, considering Pennington went to the playoffs with the Dolphins that year, and the Jets ended up missing out. And looking at his stats, with the Jets, he didn't really first get normal starts until 2012. He started 12 games that season. They went 8-4. Let's see, the year after that, he only started 9 games and went 4-5. 2004, he started 13. They went 8-5. 2005, he only starts 3 games. They go 1-2. 2006, he went 10-6, which was probably his best season. Pennington always struggled to stay healthy with that team. So he played in 6 playoff games. Let's see what he did there. So first playoff game was back in 2002. Won the first one against Indianapolis. They blew them out 41-0. Then they lost to Oakland 30-10. Let's see. He's 2-4 in the playoffs. Beat San Diego in 2004. Lost to Pittsburgh in the game after that. 2005 they got blown out, or 2006 they got blown out by New England. And 2008 is when he made the playoffs with Miami. They lost 27-9. He threw 4 picks in that game. Probably his worst playoff game ever. But yeah, Pennington didn't really work out. Was talented, but couldn't stay healthy, so couldn't really work with anything there. Favre was only there for a season. That didn't work out. Sanchez comes in. They made it to 2 AFC Championship games with Mark Sanchez, and Mark Sanchez, he was, do we all agree that he just wasn't a good quarterback at all? Or was it just maybe his best time was with New York? Because, his first couple seasons, they did fine. And it completely dropped off, and it just got worse and worse and worse. So, 2010, they went 11-5. And I guess Mark Sanchez maybe, I guess you could say never really was a good quarterback. Because, if you look at his stats, his 2009 year, his rookie year, he threw 12 touchdowns and 20 interceptions. Only threw for 2,400 yards. 2010, they went 11-5. He threw for nearly 3,300 yards. 17 touchdowns, 13 interceptions. His third season, they go 8-8, 3,400 yards, 26 touchdowns, 18 interceptions. And after that, it just got, like I said, he went 6-9 in 2012. That was his last year with them. And then he goes to Philly, starts 8 games there, they go 4-4. And since then, I mean, he's pretty much just been out the league. So, after him, they bring in Geno. Geno doesn't work. And since they've been looking. Right now, you got McCown, Teddy Bridgewater, and Sam Darnold. Obviously, McCown isn't the future in New York. And I'm assuming the future in New York, of course, would be Sam Darnold. But you look over and you got Teddy Bridgewater. And I'm fine with them starting either one. But there's a point if you're the Jets. Right now, Darnold is a rookie, okay? He's got a whole NFL career ahead of him. And I guess the point I'm just trying to make here is, if Teddy Bridgewater ends up having a better preseason than Sam Darnold, why not just make Teddy Bridgewater the starter of your team for this season? And I get it. I'm sure ownership wants to see Darnold. And I'm sure the fans want to see Darnold. But there's a point where maybe you're not in like a huge rush. Like, is there really a huge like incentive to start Darnold this season? Not necessarily. I mean, I figured Teddy Bridgewater looked really good in that first game. Teddy Bridgewater could take a team to the playoffs. I think he might have gotten there, once with Minnesota, if I'm not mistaken, or at least to the point where they were in contention. Let me see if I can check that out real quick. But either way, I mean, we've seen what kind of quarterback Teddy Bridgewater has been. It's just, we've all kind of tossed him to the side because of that injury. Plus, the Vikings not really keeping him around didn't help him going forward. So, I mean, yeah, he made the playoffs in his second season. They ended up losing that game. But, I mean, it was a 10-9 game. He did play all right. Completed 70% of his passes. I mean, only threw for 146 yards, but that was against a good Seattle defense, so it was a bit tough there. So, I mean, they got a game going on tonight. It'll be against the Redskins on ESPN. It's seeming like Darnold is going to be the starter for this game. And, I mean, that's perfectly fine, but like I said, there's a point where you got to play the guy who's playing the best. If that's Bridgewater, I'd say you go with Bridgewater. And if it's Darnold, then that's fine. I don't think there's really any point to starting McCown. I mean, I get he's getting paid the most out of, well, actually, it'd be Sam Darnold, but McCown's making, about $10 million this season? He's on a Jay Cutler deal. McCown has no business starting for this team. The guy should either be Darnold or it should be Teddy Bridgewater. And if it's Darnold, then I'm assuming they trade Teddy Bridgewater. And you look around and see who needs a Teddy Bridgewater. Not too many teams. Not any teams, if any, really. And I was looking yesterday, and I figured that if there was one team, it'd probably Denver. John Elway doesn't seem to be too happy with his backup quarterback situation. And, I mean, those first 2 series that Case Keenum ran with the Denver Broncos first-team offense in their first preseason game didn't look good at all. And, I mean, like, the throws weren't even online. Like, it was just all pretty bad all around. So, I mean, there is the chance that Case Keenum doesn't work out for Denver. You don't want Chad Kelly or Paxton Lynch coming in to be your starting quarterback if that's the case. You want a proven vet who can go out and play well. That's Teddy Bridgewater. And I think that's what's going to end up happening. Like, Elway has made it known he's looking for a veteran backup. And I feel like your best bet would be a Teddy Bridgewater. I mean, you probably have to give up, a 4th-round pick for him? 5th-round pick possibly, if you're lucky. I mean, I think it'd be worth it. And I think Teddy Bridgewater in Denver, that could be like a long-term fit there. Because, I mean, they only got Keenum on for 2 years. He's 30. Teddy Bridgewater's still only about, 25, I think it is? I mean, Teddy Bridgewater still basically got a whole NFL career ahead of him. And I figure if you're Denver, I mean, you don't really want to waste away too many years going forward. So, it'll be interesting to see what they end up doing, the Jets. I'm assuming this all ends with Sam Darnold being the starting quarterback. And I think that might be the right move. Just given that Darnold looked really good in that first game. But, I mean, the Jets finally got a hit here. It seems like every team in the AFC East has seemingly been drafting quarterback after quarterback just to try and figure out a way to get on the level of the Patriots, and that just simply hasn't worked. Brady and Belichick probably only got about 2-3 more years at the most left. So you figure it's going to be up for grabs soon. Miami's been dealing with Tannehill for 7 seasons. Not even sure if he'll be there next season if he doesn't play well here. The Jets, hoping Sam Darnold's a savior, and then over in Buffalo, I mean, they got 3 quarterbacks there. I'm sure they'd be happy with either of them being the guy to lead them back to the top in the AFC East. But I'm sure they're probably hoping it's going to be Josh Allen if it's anyone, considering they did spend the seventh pick in the draft on him. So we'll see what ends up happening. I'll definitely be watching Darnold tonight. Going to see how he does. Same with Teddy Bridgewater also. So, I mean, it's going to be interesting to see them two competing. And I'm not even sure if there is a QB competition for Teddy Bridgewater to win there. I mean, it never really made sense him going to the Jets, but either way, it did end up happening. So that's all I got to say about that. Next up, we're going to be getting into some NBA topics. So stay tuned, and I'll be right back.
Are you looking for the very best NFL and college football podcast? Then check out the GSMC Football Podcast. Get the latest football news both on and off the field. From the NFL Draft to trades to the rumor mill to the NFL Combines, they got you covered. That's GSMCpodcast.com/football-podcast. Get updates on college rivalries, game day insights, and much, much more. It's football talk the way you want it. This show eats, sleeps, and breathes football. Don't forget to like them on Facebook and follow them on Twitter. Visit GSMCpodcast.com for more info.
All right, and welcome back to the GSMC Sports Podcast. We spent that first segment talking about the Jets quarterback situation, talking about what could happen with Teddy Bridgewater. I think he's going to end up with Denver when it's all said and done, so we'll see what ends up happening there. But now we move on, and we talk about honestly anything going on in the NBA or any NBA topic or thought that I want to go over. Udonis Haslem seems like he's going to be returning back to the Heat. That's not necessarily news, but I mean, the guy's done well to stick around. And I mean, that's got to be the goal once you're an NBA vet, just to stick around. Guys like Vince Carter are doing it. I think Al Jefferson, is he in China or is he on a roster right now? I think he might be in China, but could make a comeback once the playoffs get near. But yeah, Udonis Haslem has never really been a great NBA player, dare I say it. Kind of reminds me of a Brian Scalabrine, one guy who, I mean, never really averaged more than 10 points a game, but has seemingly done pretty well for himself. And let's see, the most points Udonis Haslem ever averaged in his career was 12 points in 2007. Was that the year they won the championship, or was that 2006? I think that was 2006. But yeah, he averaged 12 points that year. Last season, averaged less than a point. Only played about 5 minutes a game. I mean, the guy's done pretty well for himself. I mean, eventually, once you get to that age where you're just an NBA vet, you sit at the end of the bench and you're pretty much just a mentor to these guys. I mean, you're pretty much just set for life there. But we're not going to spend the whole segment talking about Udonis Haslem because that'd be ridiculous. So the Rockets GM, Daryl Morey, he had some words on who the best player ever was. And he said it was LeBron James by a big margin. That's a bit of a bold statement, just seemingly because everyone seems to be still torn on this whole MJ-LeBron debate. And I guess, yes, that's what it is. It is an MJ-LeBron debate for who is the best ever. But To say it's a big margin, I'm not entirely sure. And I think I might have mentioned it on here yesterday, or might have been on the basketball podcast. But either way, LeBron plays 4 more seasons, 75 games at least in each season, and averages 25 points per game at least. He'll pass Kareem. And I think that's the point where the argument is closed. If LeBron ends up becoming the highest all-time leading scorer, or highest all-time point scorer in the history of the NBA, then, I mean, what else does he need to do? Honestly. Of course, you're going to have your trolls who will talk about the fact that he's lost in so many finals, but, I mean, the guy's won 3 championships. Chances are that's more than your favorite player, unless you're a Kobe fan or a Jordan fan. All right. But 3 championships over the course of an NBA career, I'd say is pretty solid. Also, too, when you were the best player on each of those championship teams. I mean, he basically saved Cleveland. I mean, made them relevant to a point where we all pay attention. And I mean, like I said, if he ends up becoming the all-time scorer in the NBA history, I mean, Jordan didn't do that, Kobe didn't do that, Bird didn't do that, Magic didn't do that. I mean, he's got to become the best ever. And I think that's what, like I said, is going to finish the argument there. But, I mean, we'll see what ends up happening with that. But like I said, I mean, eventually there's going to be someone who ends up becoming better than LeBron. Like, people don't realize that. I mean, I'm sure at one point people thought of Bill Russell as the greatest NBA player of all time. Then maybe Magic when he came in and played. And then you had Jordan. Then we had Kobe for a bit. And then now it's become LeBron. Eventually there's going to be some other player who steps in. I'll be older by that time. I'll be yelling about how it's LeBron. The younger kids will be yelling about how it's this new guy. And we'll continue this argument for the rest of the time. I mean, isn't it ridiculous how it works that way? And speaking of Kobe, he made a $6 million drink investment in body armor. And that investment is now worth $200 million. I'd say pretty smart investment there by Kobe Bryant. And I'd say he's doing this whole retirement thing pretty well. I feel like Kobe has made more money off the court than he has on it. I've never really been a body armor guy, never drank in it. Me, growing up, that's when I tried different stuff. Why? Because you don't have to pay for it. Eventually, when you got to pay for it, you know, okay, I like this, I like that. Don't have to waste your money trying different stuff. So I'm not sure if I'll ever try body armor, but, I mean, Kobe's making a ridiculous amount of money off of it. And I think that this is kind of the status LeBron is trying to head to. Once LeBron's done with basketball, I'm sure he wants to see, oh, this investment that he made is now worth X amount of money. We've already seen it with him investing in Blaze Pizza. But I think, like I said, that is one of the biggest reasons why LeBron ended up coming to LA. There's more business opportunity there. I've seen people say he's going to try and bring LA back to the top and get them back to their winning ways and all that. And yeah, the Lakers will be back in the playoffs again. But if I had to just make a decision on whether or not I think he gets a title in LA, I think it'd have to be no. I mean, I'd say this Warriors team has about 3 more years left till maybe they start to go down a bit. You get the Celtics, who are already one of the best teams in the East, who are extremely young, one of the 5 youngest teams in the league, I believe. Same with the Sixers, already at the top of the East, but one of the youngest teams in the league, so they only have, room to go up. You got the Raptors, who maybe if they keep Kawhi Leonard around, that keeps them a little bit more relevant. I'd say eventually the Lakers end up passing up the Rockets. But, it all depends on what the Lakers end up doing. Because, you can't take this team that they have now and try and win with this team for the next 4 years. They got to add another superstar. Or maybe they're just counting on Brandon Ingram or Lonzo turning into that superstar. But, like I said, getting back to it, LeBron's eventually trying to become a billionaire. And you do that by going to a big marketplace like LA. There's way more opportunity there than there would be in Cleveland or probably anywhere else. LeBron has seemingly, turned into a businessman at this point in his NBA career, even though he's still dominating. So I mean, like I said, people think he went to LA to win, but I honestly think it was for investments and all that. So we'll see what ends up happening there. Let's see, anything else to talk about. There's not really much else going on in the NBA. I mean, offseason, I say this NBA offseason might have been, it has been one of the worst. Because, I mean, we did get Kawhi Leonard getting traded and all that. LeBron did go to the Lakers, but, I mean, in reality, all we did was have a trade and a couple of big free agent signings. I mean, Paul George went back to Oklahoma City. Yes, LeBron left Cleveland for LA. Let's see, what other big free agents were there? DeAndre Jordan obviously went to Dallas. I mean, it wasn't anything really special. I'd say maybe the draft was a whole lot more interesting than free agency. I mean, we all knew LeBron was going to LA. We knew Paul George was going to Oklahoma City. I mean, that might have been the biggest shocker, but I mean, by the time free agency got there, even started, we all knew where Paul George was going. So, I mean, like I said, I'd say this NBA offseason is kind of disappointed so far. I mean, Kawhi going to the Raptors, that was a bit of a, I don't want to say shock, but it was different. Well, I guess now we're just waiting for the season to start. I'd say my top 5 teams in the East right now, I'm kind of torn between Toronto and Boston. I'm not sure where I want to go there, just given Boston did play without Gordon Hayward without him all last year. Kyrie Irving didn't really play most of the season. And then the Raptors got better here. So, I mean, both teams got better. I'm not sure who I want where. I'd say I'd probably put the Raptors at 1. It's like 1A and 1B. So, I mean, they could both compete for that top spot. So, they're both 1 and 2 right there. Either way, doesn't matter. Then I'd say the Sixers. Then I'd go with the Pacers and then Milwaukee. I think the Pacers are going to sneak up on some people this season, kind of be like the Jazz. And out west, I'd say it goes Warriors. I really like the Jazz, so I'll go Jazz 2, Rockets 3. I guess I'll go Thunder 4, and then Lakers 5. And isn't that a bit ridiculous how Melo leaving the Thunder has seemingly made him, made the majority of thoughts about him just a better team? Like, everyone just automatically assumes that the Thunder are just going to be a better team now that they don't have Melo. And last year, they didn't look great at all. So, that's one team that I'm kind of excited to watch this season. I do think Melo was holding him back, but also there was a point where maybe it just wasn't the best fit for him there. So now we got Paul George and Russell Westbrook running the show. You have Roberson coming back off of injury. Steven Adams still there. They're going to have a real solid team. It's just a matter of if their bench can get it going also. So, we'll see what ends up happening. I think this basketball season is going to be a whole lot more competitive and interesting than people think. I think we all know who the favorites to win it all are, and it's the Warriors. But either way, I think we're going to be in for a couple of surprises this season. I'm not really sure which teams are going to be causing the surprise, but either way, the season's going to go a whole lot different than I think we think it will. So that's all I got to say about that. Next up, we'll be talking some MLB stuff, so stay tuned, and I'll be right back.
Check out the show that's built on the MMA. From the UFC to Extreme Cage Fighting, they got the fights covered. Check out the GSMC MMA podcast. Get the latest news on past or upcoming fights. Join us as we talk to and about some of the biggest names in the MMA, past, present, and future. When it's the fight game, there's just one show to check out. GSMCpodcast.com/MMA-podcast. Don't forget to like them on Facebook and follow them on Twitter. Visit GSMCpodcast.com for more info.
Alright, And welcome back to the GSMC Sports Podcast. So far today, we've talked Jets quarterbacks. And for that second segment, talked about some NBA stuff going on and anything that crossed my mind as far as the NBA goes. So now we move on to the MLB. And I'm about maybe a day late to the party, but obviously there's discussion on Jose Urena of the Marlins hitting Ronald Acuna Jr. of the Braves in their recent game. Acuna hitting leadoff, and I mean, the dude's been mashing the ball as of late. I think before he got hit, he was 5 games in a row with a home run. I mean, the dude has absolutely been destroying the ball. Basically, going to become the new face of the Braves, and might become one of the best players in the league eventually. But either way, like I said, he's hitting home runs, absolutely destroying the Marlins. And the first pitch to start that game, at least to start Acuna's at bat, the dude gets drilled. Ends up leaving the game with an elbow injury. Got a CT scan. That's normal. He's going to be hitting leadoff in their next game, which is tonight against the Rockies. And baseball is a weird sport as far as the unwritten rules go. You can do this, you can't do that. If you're a rookie, you do this, you don't do that. If you're a vet, you can do all of this and all that. There's also rules, unwritten rules, as far as hitting players. If one pitcher hits one of your best, you go back and you get them. But I am not sure what the unwritten rule book says about hitting a man just because your team can't pitch to him. I don't get the whole hitting Acuna just because he's been hitting home runs off of you. I've never understood that. And I've never understood why pitchers get so frustrated when players will admire their home run or flip their bat. I don't get that at all. And people say, oh, well, it's because you're showing up the pitcher. Have you ever seen a pitcher show emotion after a strikeout? After a great inning? If you say no, you're lying. Pitchers do that all the time. But it doesn't seem to be a problem there. That's all. The pitcher is showing heart. Pitcher's just fired up. I don't understand what the problem with bat flipping is. There shouldn't be one at all. And like I said here, I don't get what the problem is with Acuna hitting home runs all over your team. Why are you going to hit him because of that? That makes no sense. I mean, if a Braves pitcher hit a Marlins pitcher and then Acuna just happens to be the guy who gets plunked by the Marlins now, I mean, that's just the way it goes. I mean, you don't hit a guy for hitting a bunch of home runs off of your team. And I mean, this sums up the Marlins pretty perfectly. I mean, the team's a dumpster fire right now. Jeter traded away all their talent, and now they barely even get about double digits in the thousands over to show up to their games. I think their average attendance for the season has been a little over 9,000 people, I think. And that's terrible. The Marlins really don't need to be in the news for anything. I mean, mainly just for losing, but you don't need stories like this where you got people, extremely mad at the Marlins and Jose Urena. You don't need this bad publicity right now. You've already had enough. So, Marlins not necessarily doing things the right way. The Braves, they're leading the NL East right now, playing good baseball. So, I mean, one team has gone one way, the other, pretty much bottom of the barrel type team in the MLB. I'm sure we could find some AAA teams that might be better than this Marlins team. Might be tough, but I'm sure we could find a couple. So let's see, anything else going on right now? Aaron Judge, obviously frustrated at the fact that the guy hasn't been able to play for the Yankees for a while. Just given that the fact that, his hand is broke. And even with him being out, it seems like the sky's been falling down over in Yankee land. But honestly, if you look at it, they're the second best team in the MLB. I mean, of course, you got Boston at 86-35. They're 10 games back there. Right now, you got the Yankees at 75-45. It's a better record than the Houston Astros. They're better than the A's right now. And, I mean, the next highest win total in the NL is the Cubs with 69. So, I mean, like I said, the sky has been falling, and I do think that little mentality, sky's been falling mentality with the Yankees, just given that they've been losing a lot, but I think it just has to do with the fact that the Red Sox, like, they're 10 games back of the Red Sox. I think it's a bit of an overreaction here for the Yankees. And I've been a part of that overreaction, too. I mean, let's say that the Red Sox are actually 76-46. We'll take 10 wins off of them, add 10 losses. Yankees are a game back. You think anyone is yelling about the fact that maybe the Yankees aren't pitching as well or anything like that? No. The story becomes the Yankees are right there. Yankees, Red Sox, AL East divisional race. Who's going to win it? But since the Yankees are 10 games back, everything's been a little bit more scrutinized given that there's no AL East divisional race to talk about. So, I mean, as bad as it has seemed for the Yankees, they are still the second best record in the MLB. I mean, the only downside to it is that you're probably going to have to play in the wild card game, and I'm sure they don't want to play the Astros or A's. Especially the Astros, given that, I mean, the Astros have all the talent in the world, but the Astros have been struggling as of late. So, we'll see what ends up happening, but like I said, sky isn't necessarily falling for the Yankees. It's just the Red Sox are that much better, so there's no divisional race to talk about. So you got to talk about Severino struggling, which he has. But, I mean, I say the team's in a pretty decent spot as of right now. So let's see what happened with yesterday's scores, see who won and who lost. I believe the A's finally dropped one, and also so did the Red Sox, two teams who necessarily haven't done too much losing as of late. So let's see, for Wednesday the 15th, we had the White Sox beating the Tigers 6-5. The Twins beat the Pirates 6-4. Pirates tried going for the wild card at the trade deadline, trading for Chris Archer. That is completely backfired on them. Cubs beat the Brewers 8-4. Had the Mariners beating the A's in 12 innings 2-0. Phillies beating the Red Sox 7-4. I believe the Red Sox were up 3 runs at one point in the game. Drew Pomeranz comes in. Team struggles. Rafael Devers can't field to save his life at third base. Gives up runs there on an error. Mets beat the Orioles 16-5. Battle of the two worst teams in the league. Let's see. The Rays beat the Yankees 6-1. I don't know what it is with the Yankees going up against the Tampa Bay Rays and the Baltimore Orioles. Like, they just struggle, and I don't get it at all. Indians beat the Reds 4-3. Braves beat the Marlins 5-2. Astros beat the Rockies 12-1. Blue Jays beat the Royals 6-5. Cardinals beat the Nationals 4-2. Angels beat the Padres 3-2. And we have Brian Dozier walking it off on a sac fly for the Dodgers in 12 innings against the Giants. Dodgers win that one 4-3 there. Dodgers been struggling as of late. I will say that. So let's see what's going on as far as the scores today. Right now, Yankees and Rays currently playing. Yankees, it's bottom of the ninth. They're down 3-1. Bases are loaded. So they got a chance to actually end up taking the lead time or winning runs at the plate right now. Neil Walker. Let's see, the Mets and Phillies currently playing. That one's in the bottom of the second. Mets currently up 1-0. Cubs, Pirates playing later on today. The Nationals and Cardinals playing later on. Rockies, Braves. Mets, Phillies playing in a doubleheader. Angels, Rangers, Tigers, Twins, Blue Jays, Royals, and then we got Diamondbacks and Padres playing later on today. So, we'll see how these games end up playing out. Let's see. Yeah, so Yankees game's still going on. Actually, let's see. Let's check out the standings real quick before we finish it off. Like I said, Red Sox up 10 games on the Yankees. Indians won their division a long time ago. Astros up 2 games on the A's, 4.5 up on the Mariners. Braves up 2 games on the Phillies. Cubs up 3 on the Brewers, 4 on the Cardinals. Watch out for those Cardinals. Diamondbacks up 1.5 games on both the Rockies and Dodgers, and 5.5 up on the Giants. Let's double check the wild card standings real quick. Yankees 3.5 up on the A's. A's 2.5 up on the Mariners for that second spot. And then over in the NL, Phillies and Milwaukee both tied for the top spot, but Phillies end up taking that top spot due to tiebreaker and win percentage. So the Cardinals are a game back of the Brewers for that second spot. Rockies and Dodgers 2.5 games back. And I'd say the Pirates and Giants are pretty much out of that race. So we'll see how the season ends up finishing out. But we're going to wrap it up here. Next up, we will be talking about anything else going on in the world of sports. So stay tuned, and I will be right back.
Are you looking for help for your fantasy football team? Check out the GSMC Fantasy Football Podcast. Get today's best advice on who to start, who to sit, even who you should draft. From sleeper picks to red-hot lineups, they got it all covered for you. That's GSMCpodcast.com/fantasy-football-podcast. We'll cover traditional leagues, dynasty, PPR, even IDP leagues. When you need fantasy help, there's just one show to hit up. Don't forget to like them on Facebook and follow them on Twitter. Visit GSMCpodcast.com for more info.
All right, and welcome back to the GSMC Sports Podcast. We spent that first segment talking about the Jets quarterback situation, the second segment talking about some NBA stuff, third segment about the MLB, and this fourth one now we'll be talking about anything else. So I think I've talked a little bit about the fact that watching Hard Knocks, I've seen that it seems like Cleveland still has that losing culture there. Not a real good mentality, and it seems like the culture hasn't been fixed yet. I mean, coaches don't really seem like they're all on the same page, and neither do the players. I mean, it just seems like one big whole cluster. So, Dez Bryant, he's in Cleveland today. Talked on one of their radio shows. Basically said him and the Browns got some things that they got to work out, but is looking forward to the fact of possibly playing for that team. So it seems like, I mean, they got to work out some things in the contract and all that, but Dez Bryant probably will most likely become a Cleveland Brown. That's fine, but like I said, if you're adding Dez Bryant to this culture, how does it help this team? I mean, I don't think Dez Bryant is a locker room problem or anything like that, but if you send him into a bad situation, kind of like a toxic situation, that's pretty much what Cleveland has been over the course of the better part of 20 years. How do you expect that to work out? I mean, as soon as we got Dez Bryant yelling at a quarterback, you know that's going to be on ESPN, and you know that's going to be something the team's going to have to talk about at press conferences. And I get they're trying to bring on every great player they can, but there's a point where you got to fix the mentality and culture on the inside before you can even hope to win a game or anything like that. And I'm not sure they've done that. And I think that kind of makes a little bit more sense as to why they've only won one game over the last 2 years. I mean, I don't think we've ever had the Cleveland Browns on a Hard Knocks, and that's kind of ridiculous how. But of course, them being on it this year has shown that you kind of see the problems going on within that organization because you get an extended look. Things don't seem normal there at all. And I might be overreacting a bit. I'm not so sure that I am, but like I said, if Cleveland doesn't have that culture fixed up and it's not like a whole new mentality and way of thinking, and if Hugh Jackson is still trying to run things the way he has in the last 2 years, then this team has no shot whatsoever of doing anything. I get careless who your quarterback is, who your running backs are, who your receivers are, and who's on your defense. Because, I mean, you can't really tell me and look at that team from last year and say, oh, yeah, there's no way that team was going to win a game. I mean, let me see if I can pull up the Detroit Lions 0-16 roster and put that up with Cleveland's and see exactly how bad both teams were. Because, I mean, Cleveland, like I said, wasn't that bad, at least on paper. I mean, they had games where they, were close in. So let me pull that up real quick and we'll compare those two rosters. All right, so I'm looking at it here, and I mean, that Detroit Lions team, they weren't really in any of their games. I mean, they were losing by double digits pretty much, it seems, on the regular. And looking at that team, their quarterbacks, you had Dan Orlovsky. He started 7 games, lost 7 of them. John Kitna started 4 games, lost them. And then you had Dante Culpepper starting 5 games. He lost all 5. And at that point, Dante Culpepper was pretty much a shell of himself. I mean, wasn't really great. And of course, you had Drew Stanton. He threw 17 passes that season, and Drew Henson threw 2. So, I mean, you're already looking at the quarterbacks. I'd say those guys are worse than what Cleveland put out. Cleveland, I had to go with Deshaun Kaiser, Kevin Hogan. I mean, Deshaun Kaiser started 15 games. Kaiser was bad, but I don't think he was as bad as Orlovsky, Kitna, or even Culpepper. And you look at that team, I mean, Detroit was just, they had no great players besides Calvin Johnson, but at that point, I mean, Calvin Johnson was barely even in the league. I mean, you look at it, Kevin Smith was their running back, started 12 games that season. You had Rudy Johnson, a guy from Cincinnati. I mean, that's not great. Calvin Johnson, obviously a decent player there. But other than that, I mean, it had a bunch of no-name players. I mean, Sean McDonald, not great. Like I said, you had Roy Williams there, but he was old and washed by then. This team was a bunch of ragtag guys. Well, I mean, you had no set team there. They were brutal. Like I said, they were getting blown out every game. Out here in Cleveland, you had guys like Isaiah Crowell, Duke Johnson, David Njoku, Corey Coleman. You even had Josh Gordon towards the end of the season. I mean, they had decent talent. I'm not saying the Browns should have won like 5 games or anything like that, but they shouldn't have went 0-16 at all. You look at Detroit, that's a clear 0-16 type team. You see why they went 0-16, but here with Cleveland, I mean, there was no reason to. Should have won at least a couple of games there. And looking at Cleveland's season, I mean, they lost 2 games in overtime. They lost their first game to the Steelers by 3. They lost to the Colts by 3. They lost to the Jets by 3 points. Let's see, they lost to the Titans in 3 points in that overtime game. They lost to the Packers by a touchdown in overtime. And they lost to Pittsburgh by 4. So, I mean, it's about 6 games where they're in it to the end, but just couldn't pull it out. And if you're consistently losing like that, it's just because you're not well coached. And I don't necessarily think Hugh Jackson is a great head coach. I mean, he hasn't ever really shown that. I mean, even with Oakland, they went 8-8 one season. He gets fired, and he throws his team under the bus at that last press conference. And I've noticed that with Hugh Jackson. He seems to be a guy who has pushed the blame from himself onto someone else every time. I mean, last season, remember he blamed the offensive struggles on the fact that they didn't have an offensive coordinator, and he said he didn't hire an offensive coordinator because of the fact that it was a job that no one could do. There was no winning there. I mean, you see how it works? Like I said, he blamed the Raiders team that year for them going 8-8 and all that. I mean, I'll never forget the end of the year press conference. So, I mean, the Browns can bring on Dez Bryant if they want, but like I said, I don't necessarily think this is going to be something that works out. Just given the fact that there's still that past losing culture, losing mentality type of thing still there. So we'll see what happens. We'll see. Maybe Baker Mayfield is the man to change that. But I think this season for Cleveland ends with Hugh Jackson becoming an offensive coordinator, someone else, and then bringing in a new head coach. And I think that's what's got to happen. I mean, Hugh Jackson's gone 1-31 his last 2 seasons. Obviously, if something was going to work, there would have been some promise the last 2 years, and that's just not the case at all. So that's all I got to say about that. We're going to wrap it up here. Today we talked Jets quarterback situation, talked some NBA stuff, MLB, and then for this segment talked a lot about the Browns. So thanks for listening to the GSMC Sports Podcast. As always, I am your host, Jesse Tapia. I will be back tomorrow, so stay tuned, and I will talk to you guys later.
You've been listening to the Golden State Media Concepts Sports Podcast, part of the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. You can find this show and others like it at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Download our podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, and Google Play. Just type in GSMC to find all the shows from the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. From movies to music, from sports to entertainment, and even weird news. You can also follow us on Twitter and on Facebook. Thank you, and we hope you have enjoyed today's program.